Israel begins main stage of Gaza City assault. Thousands flee south as Israel intensifies Gaza City assault. And UN inquiry accuses Israel of genocide in Gaza, urges immediate halt to the offensive. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has stressed the urgent need for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the release of detainees, and the swift delivery of humanitarian aid. In talks with Spain's king, he underscored the importance of halting escalations to preserve regional stability and firmly rejected any attempts to displace Palestinians from their homeland, warning that forced displacement constitutes aggression and a grave threat to neighboring states' security. Israel says its forces have begun the main stage of their Gaza City ground assault, with operations expected to last months. The Israeli Occupation Army said its 162nd and 98th Division are expanding operations with more units to join soon, as Defense Minister Israel Katz warned Gaza would be destroyed if Hamas does not release the hostages and arm. A spokesman said Israeli forces now occupy widespread areas of Gaza City after weeks of fighting in neighborhoods like Zaytun, Sheikh Radwan, and Jabalia. The estimated 350,000 Palestinians have fled the city, adding Israel has adjusted humanitarian measures as civilians move south. Israel has released footage showing its forces driving through Gaza City during the latest ground assault. The Israeli Occupation Army published footage of military vehicles moving inside the city as it pressed ahead with the long-threatened ground operation. The footage came as Israel declared the start of a new phase of the war, pushing deeper into the enclave's main urban hub. Israel confirmed its ground assault on Gaza City is underway, with more troops expected to join soon. Military spokesperson Efi Defrin said the operation's goal is to defeat Hamas and secure the return of Israeli captives. He vowed the assault will continue until those objectives are met. Officials said forces are advancing deeper into Gaza City and will increase in number in the coming days to confront an estimated 3,000 Hamas fighters, according to them. Palestinian medical sources say more than 30 people have been killed by Israeli fire since dawn, including 21 in Gaza City. The sources said 5 Palestinians waiting for aid were shot dead by Israeli forces near the distribution center north of Rafah. Palestinian media reported an Israeli airstrike hitting Gaza City's Sheikh Radwan neighborhood, while 5 others were killed in strikes on Nusayrat camp in Gaza City. Gaza's health ministry says Israeli forces struck Al-Rantisi Children's Hospital, forcing patients to flee. The ministry said the upper floors of the hospital were hit 3 times, forcing 40 patients to leave in search of safety. Officials condemned the attack as a crime against Gaza's most vulnerable. Displaced Palestinians in Gaza say they have no money to move south, forced to sleep outside Al-Quds hospital. In Tel El-Hawa, south of Gaza City, families were seen bedding down on the ground outside the hospital as Israel pressed its ground assault on the city. Displaced civilians have said people cannot afford to move either south or within Gaza. Doctors in Gaza say hospitals are overwhelmed with patients as Israel's ground assault on the Gaza city intensifies. At Al-Shifa Hospital, medics said they are forced to treat patients on the floor, with only 3 operating rooms available. Emergency staff described choosing between saving the lives of children and the elderly. A pediatrician at Al-Rantisi Hospital warned that 3/4 of vital medicines are unavailable, and oxygen is in short supply, putting children at risk. Thousands of displaced Palestinians are moving southward along Gaza's coastal road as Israel intensifies its military assault on Gaza City. Footage from central Gaza shows families traveling by car, truck, and carts piled with belongings while others walk on foot. Many were seen sitting roadside, exhausted from the journey. The exodus follows Israeli military leaflets urging civilians to leave Gaza City, now declared a dangerous combat zone. Families are now being pushed towards overcrowded areas in the south, though these zones are reported to be neither livable or safe. Internet and phone services have been cut in Gaza and the north after Israeli strikes hit key network lines. Palestinians' telecom company said major infrastructure routes were targeted, knocking out connectivity. Technical teams are working around the clock to restore the service, but the dangerous field conditions are hindering repairs. For more analysis, we now move to Rana Al-Assas in our newsroom. To you, Rana.
Thank you so much, Riham. And for further analysis, we're joined from Cairo by Al-Ahram newspaper managing editor, Ashraf Abul Hol. Welcome to Qnews, sir, and it's a pleasure to have you with us. How can Israel claim to be adjusting humanitarian measures while its forces are simultaneously killing civilians waiting for food aid and bombing densely populated neighborhoods?
Of course, the whole world realize what Israel is doing. Israel is using the starvation policy on purpose, seizing the Palestinians, striking Gaza, forcing them having them force this southward, and so everyone sees this, and so it is impossible for anyone to believe that Israel is providing them with humanitarian aid. The people who are being displaced from Gaza can't find anywhere to stay. They can find food, water, medicine. Things are very hard right now. The situation is very dire, and there are more deaths every day. Children and women and the elderly because of starving. And so everyone can see this and are condemning Israel's starvation policy.
What does the mass displacement of 350,000 Palestinians from Gaza City reveal about Israel's strategy? Does this amount to ethnic cleansing under international law?
Of course, when Israel uh, forces people, around third of the civilians in Gaza Strip that has around 1 million people there, and so when Israel forcefully displaces them without providing any alternatives for them or any places to stay, and so this is an ethnic cleansing, especially that this displacement is still going on. The military operations keep escalating. The tanks keep entering the neighborhoods in Gaza. There are strikes that destroy buildings and destroy their houses, destroy the camps even, and some displaced people because of lack of transportation and lack of money had to carry their belongings on their backs and go to the south on foot, and some of them are injured, elderly, children, and even women.
Sir, with the majority of hospitals overwhelmed, lacking medicine and oxygen, how does Israel's ground assault violate international humanitarian law on the protection of medical facilities?
Of course, Israel, ever since they started ever since they started the war, they have striked tons of hospitals like Mamdani Hospital, Nasser Hospital, and other hospitals as well, the European hospital as well. These hospitals were targeted, and they have killed some of the medical staff. They also took them hostages, took the nurses and the doctors, destroyed the ambulances, and what's even more important, they are blocking the medical equipments and medicines to enter hospitals, and they even cut the electricity at the hospitals and don't provide them with fuel that allows the hospitals to operate their devices. And so, and according to the witnesses, there the hospitals are very overwhelmed. The injured actually sleep on the floor, and you can find like 2 or more patients on one bed, and so this is a crime against humanity.
How credible are Israel's justifications of targeting Hamas when the majority of casualties include civilians, and when strikes repeatedly hit aid centers and refugee camps, sir?
Hamas haven't been seen in the streets. The tanks keep striking without anyone facing them, and so this shows that what they said is a lie. There is no Hamas in the city, and they've said that there are thousands of Hamas people there, and so the target here is the civilians, not Hamas. Where are the people of Hamas, and where are their arms? What is for sure is that Hamas doesn't have arms or strong arms. They have just personal weapons, and they cannot be spotted if they were even there to begin with. But Israel keeps saying that they are targeting Hamas and the resistance as a justification to keep on destroying the Gaza Strip and to keep displacing them from the Strip. And so for everyone who keeps up to date with the operations in Gaza, everyone said that they haven't seen even one person from Hamas in Gaza over the past few days.
By declaring Gaza City a dangerous combat zone and forcing civilians to flee south into overcrowded areas, is Israel deliberately making the enclave unlivable to achieve political or military objectives?
Yes. Israel's objective is ever since they started is to make Gaza unlivable. After the 7th of October, Israel claimed that they will enter the strip to get their hostages back and to end Hamas. But actually, they have focused on destroying the strip, displacing the people. They have turned lots of the cities and the strip to and made them unlivable, like Rafah, Jabalia, Beit Hanun, and Beit Naya, Khan Yunis also, and other parts of Gaza are now ash basically. And Israel now is using robots, which are basically some kind of tanks that they fill up with bombs and such things, and they send them to the neighborhoods and to the houses to destroy them. And also Israel, as everyone sees in the world, keep striking whole buildings in Gaza. And if this says something, it says that this is not a war between two armies, or between an army and resistance. It is actually a targeted operation to destroy the strip from Israel's side. They are trying to destroy anything that makes Gaza what it is: hospitals, schools, houses, even the government buildings. They are destroying everything so that they can take over.
That was Ashraf Abu Hol from Cairo, Al Ahram newspaper managing editor. Thank you very much for joining us on Q News. And now we go back to my dear colleague Rihem Morsi in our studio.
Thank you so much, Shana, for that interview. And we move on to protesters that marched in Jerusalem demanding an end to the war and release of Israeli captives. Demonstrators rallied near Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's residence as Israel launched its ground assault on Gaza City, declaring Gaza is burning. Protesters accused the government of endangering the captives' lives by expanding the offensive, with families warning it risks delaying a deal to bring them home. Many also voiced anger at what they called a regime destroying the country. UNICEF says 26,000 children in Gaza need urgent treatment for acute malnutrition, with famine already confirmed in Gaza City. UNICEF spokeswoman Tess Ingram described child malnutrition in Gaza as spiraling as Israel intensifies its offensive on Gaza City and continues to cut off aid. Families with starving children are being displaced southward into overcrowded camps, lacking food, water, and medical care. The UN says nearly 70,000 people have fled Gaza City in recent days, most along Al-Rashid Road, towards the so-called humanitarian zones that aid workers say are overwhelmed and inadequate. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says the war in Gaza is horrendous and must not continue.
What happens in Gaza today is horrendous. We are seeing massive destruction of neighborhoods, now the systematic destruction of Gaza City. We are seeing massive killing of civilians in a way that I do not remember in any conflict since I am Secretary General. And we are seeing dramatic obstacles to the distribution of humanitarian aid. At a certain moment, it completely stopped, with the consequences that the Palestinian people is suffering an horrendous situation with famine, with no access to any kind of health support, and with continued displacement and the immense risk of losing their lives at any moment. So this is something we cannot forget, independently of the names that are given. The truth is that this is something that it is morally, politically, and legally intolerable.
The UN chief Antonio Guterres further added that a two-state solution is the only way to end the Israeli-Palestine conflict. Speaking at a press conference, Guterres warned that a one-state reality built on the subjugation of Palestinians is unacceptable in the 21st century. He said recognizing a Palestinian state is not a gift to Hamas, but to the Palestinian people who have long suffered. Guterres voiced alarm at the Israeli occupation army's assault on Gaza, condemning the large-scale civilian deaths and destruction as morally, politically, and legally intolerable. Pope Leo XIV says civilians in Gaza are living in unacceptable conditions. Speaking at his weekly general audience, the pontiff expressed solidarity with the population of Gaza, saying they had once again been forced from their land and were enduring conditions that cannot be accepted. His remarks come as civilians face mass displacement, bombardment, and worsening humanitarian suffering in the enclave.
Costretto con la forza a spostarsi ancora una volta dalle proprie terre.
A UN inquiry has accused Israel of committing genocide in Gaza, urging it to halt its military offensive immediately. The Independent International Commission of Inquiry said Israeli authorities and security forces committed 4 of the 5 genocidal acts defined under the 1948 Genocide Convention, including killing, causing serious harm, and deliberately inflicting life conditions aimed at destruction. Chair Navi Pillai said leaders including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, President Isaac Herzog, and other officials incited genocide. The report concluded Israel bears responsibility for committing and failing to prevent genocide, as well as urging an end to the blockade and the transfer of arms. The Muslim Council of Elders, chaired by Al-Azhar's Grand Imam Ahmad al-Tayyib, has strongly condemned the Israeli occupation army's assault on Gaza, warning of the grave humanitarian consequences of this escalation. In a statement, the Council described the invasion of Gaza as a dangerous escalation that threatens the lives of innocent civilians and undermines the efforts of achieving peace and stability in the region. It urged the international community to assume its legal, humanitarian, and moral responsibilities to stop what it called a brutal aggression, protect civilians, and allow the urgent entry of humanitarian aid. The Council also reaffirmed its unwavering support for the Palestinian cause and the people's legitimate right to establishing an independent state with Jerusalem as its capital, stressing the need to end their decades-long suffering. Over 28 agencies, including Islamic Relief, are urging urgent global action to stop the bloodshed in Gaza. In a letter to the UN, aid groups warn the enclave faces the deadliest chapter in its history with no action taken. They cited lethal militarization of aid routes and shootings at crowds seeking food, calling on governments to prevent further loss of life and end the violence. China says it firmly opposes Israel's major ground assault on Gaza City. Foreign Ministry spokesman Lin Jian said Beijing condemns the escalation of military operations and all acts that harm civilians and violate international law. His remarks came after Israel launched a long-threatened ground offensive on Gaza's largest urban hub, vowing to crush Hamas as bombardment swept across the city. Canada has denounced Israel's new ground assault on Gaza City as horrific, saying it worsens the humanitarian crisis. In a post on X, Canada's Foreign Ministry said the offensive also jeopardizes the release of hostages. Israel declares Gaza is burning as the Israeli occupation army pushed deeper into the enclave's main city, where officials had estimated some 3,000 Hamas fighters remain. Palestinians described the bombardment as the most intense since the war began nearly 2 years ago. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel will build an independent arms industry to withstand international constraints. Netanyahu said during a speech that Israel's economy has endured both COVID and the ongoing 2-year war in Gaza. He stressed the need for self-sufficiency in weapons production amid what he called mounting external pressures. Netanyahu also announced he was being invited by U.S. President Donald Trump to the White House in 2 weeks, following his planned address to the United Nations.
Technology of the future, cyber, AI, and so many other things.
The European Commission says it will move faster to end imports of Russian fossil fuel after talks with U.S. President Donald Trump. Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said she spoke with Trump about strengthening joint efforts to increase economic pressure on Moscow. The bloc had planned to stop Russian oil and gas purchases by 2028, but is now set to accelerate the timeline. Despite sanctions, Europe and the US still import billions of euros worth of Russian energy and commodities more than 3 years into the war in Ukraine. The Kremlin says Europe's plan to accelerate the phase-out of Russian energy imports will not pressure Moscow to change its stance. Spokesman Dmitry Peskov dismissed the European Union's move, announced by Commission President Ursula von der Leyen after talks with U.S. President Donald Trump. He said Russia will not be affected by the decision and stressed that Moscow still prefers the crisis in Ukraine to be resolved through diplomacy. The comments highlight Russia's defiance as Western leaders push for deeper energy diversification away from Moscow. Poland's prime minister says NATO membership makes the country far safer than 1939 when it faced invasions from Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. Speaking on the anniversary of the Soviet invasion of Poland, Donald Tusk said everything is different today, stressing that Poland now has a real alliance. His remarks came as Polish and NATO troops stage exercises in response to Russian-Belarusian war games nearby. Tusk vowed no one should dare attack any NATO state, recalling that Poland last week shot down Russian drones in a first for the alliance. This brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here's what we've been covering. Israel begins main stage of Gaza City assault. Thousands flee south as Israel intensifies Gaza City assault. And the UN inquiry accuses Israel of genocide in Gaza, urges immediate halt to offensive. This concludes our news bulletin for this hour. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at QNewsEGY to stay informed. Thank you for watching.